Someplace on Interstate 40 tonight, a fleet card will approve $600 of diesel. The truck will pull away in minutes, and the travel center that handled the sale may clear less on it than on the coffee cooling by the register. That is not a fault. It is the design and the heart of the strangest riddle on the American roadside, how a business can look packed around the clock and still run out of money. The scale involved is huge. Roughly 3.5 million truck drivers move most of this country's freight. The Federal Highway Administration says trucks carry more than 70% of domestic shipment value each year, and nearly all of that movement depends on diesel sold along the interstates. The three largest travel center chains alone run around 1,800 sites. Pilot, now owned by Berkshire Hathaway, sells about 12 billion gallons of fuel a year. Love's runs 668 stores across 42 states. Travel Centers of America, bought by the oil giant BP, brought 288 full-size travel centers into that deal. From the highway, the business looks simple. Trucks need fuel. You sell fuel. Volume should equal success. Yet in 2023, a company with $11 billion in annual revenue agreed to sell its equity for $1.3 billion. Including leases and net debt, BP cited an enterprise value near $3.5 billion. Berkshire Hathaway paid $8.2 billion for 41.4% of Arrival, then $2.6 billion for the remaining stake. Those transactions covered assets, ownership percentages, and obligations, so they are not perfectly comparable. Still, the contrast points towards something traffic alone cannot explain. This is ownership atlas, and we will trace that difference because it decides which owners build wealth and which ones go under with a full parking lot. Begin with the product everyone assumes is the business: diesel. In the first week of July 2026, the national average price of on-highway diesel was about $4.58 a gallon, according to the Energy Information Administration. Where does that money go? The agency's March 2026 breakdown, when diesel averaged $4.92, showed the answer. Roughly 42% reflected crude oil. 34% covered refining. 12% went to taxes. The remaining 12% covered distribution and marketing, a category spanning pipelines, terminals, tanker trucks, station operations, and the profits or losses left throughout that delivery chain before fuel reaches the driver at the pump. Out of that final slice, the retailer still has to receive the fuel, store it below ground, operate pumps around the clock, staff the counter, and process the payment. What survives is the gross margin, and in this industry, it is measured in cents per gallon rather than dollars. Travel centers disclosed the necessary data. During 2021, the company generated about $393 million of fuel gross margin on roughly 2.3 billion gallons, or around 17 cents per gallon. In 2022, unusually favorable fuel markets lifted the annual figure to roughly 25 cents on a product that can sell for $4, $5, or more dollars per gallon. For trucks, it often runs tighter still. Large carriers do not pay the number on the sign. They strike cost plus contracts, agreeing to pay the wholesale market price plus a fixed few cents in trade for steering hundreds of trucks to one brand's canopies. A travel center full of contracted fleet traffic can be moving huge volume at margins an outsider would never believe. The gallons build revenue. Revenue is not profit, and the distance between those two words is where this entire industry lives. Then comes the swipe. Card fees are charged as a share of the sale, and on fuel, the ticket is huge. The convenience trade group NACS reports that American fuel retailers paid about $21 billion in card fees in 2024, up more than 80% since 2020, making swipe fees the industry's second largest operating cost after labor. On credit cards, total processing costs often approach 2 to 3%. Work that math on a $600 diesel fill, and the card networks can collect more from the sale than the store keeps for itself. The group adds that for many stores, annual card fees now exceed pre-tax profits. The busy but broke riddle is already starting to explain itself. Watch the price sign at any exit, and you can see the fight over that swipe. A cash price next to a card price, app deals tied to the store, house fleet cards, all of it is there to steer a sale away from the fee or to win a name, a habit, and a next visit in return for the cut. Fuel carries one more trap. The price refuses to hold still. This year proved it. Diesel averaged near $3.70 in February. Middle East supply disruptions then pushed the national average above $5.80 in April before falling by more than $1 as crude prices retreated and supply fears eased. For a travel center, every one of those swings hits the checking account before it ever reaches the roadside sign. A site pumping 300,000 gallons a month must purchase that inventory first. When wholesale costs jump sharply within weeks, the cash required merely to keep the tanks full jumps with them. And because card fees are calculated as a share of the transaction price, a fuel spike raises payment costs even when the retailer's margin per gallon has not improved by even 1 cent. So if diesel is a river of low-margin dollars, where does the real profit come from? The cleanest answer in the public record comes from TravelCenter's final full year as an independent company. In 2022, the firm booked about $10.8 billion of total revenue, and roughly 8 of every 10 of those dollars came from fuel. Look at gross profit, though, and the picture flips fast. Fuel earned about $570 million of gross margin in a record fuel year. Everything else, the food, the goods, the showers, the truck repair bays, made nearly $1.3 billion at a margin above 60%. 1/5 of the revenue gave more than 2/3 of the gross profit. Its own franchise terms whispered the same secret. It charged franchisees 4.5% royalties on non-fuel sales, but only 0.7 of 1 cent per gallon on fuel. When the people who knew the business best set their fees, they told you exactly where the value lived. Fuel brings the customer. The margin waits inside. If tracing real money through familiar American businesses is why you pressed play, this is a good moment to subscribe to Ownership Atlas. Each episode opens a different industry's books, checks the story against filings and federal data, and follows the profit to where it actually hides. That is the entire channel. Walk through the front door and the economics change on every shelf. Coffee that sells for a few dollars costs a fraction of that to brew. Hot food, fountain drinks, packaged snacks, and private label goods carry gross margins fuel could never touch. Showers may be the shrewdest product on the property. Chains sell them for about the price of a restaurant meal, then hand them out free with a large diesel fill through loyalty deals. That single move turns a low-margin fuel stop into a high-margin visit, pulls the driver past the coolers and the hot case, and purchases loyalty with a clean bathroom. Industry data backs the instinct. Across American convenience retail, prepared food and packaged drinks alone drove about 60% of all in-store profit dollars in 2024. For many sites, the kitchen becomes the profit engine. Then there's the work on the truck itself. Love's operates more than 400 truck care and Speedco locations with about 1,400 maintenance bays nationwide, selling oil changes, tires, and roadside repair. Parts and labor on an 80,000-pound rig are not impulse buys. They are urgent, high-ticket, and high-margin, and they give a location a reason to be the planned stop instead of the handy one. Add certified truck scales taking a fee on every weigh, and, in a handful of states, gaming machines and lottery counters paying commissions that some operators lean on and other owners flatly refuse on principle. Every one of these revenue lines shares a single trait. None of them depends on the price of oil. That points to the number this industry quietly runs on, not gallons. Gross profit per stop. Two trucks can each take on 130 gallons. The first driver pays with a contracted fleet card and pulls straight back onto the ramp, leaving the site a few dollars. The second parks for the night, showers, eats dinner, and buys coffee and breakfast at dawn. Same fuel. Under numbers any operator would recognize, the second visit can be worth several times the first in actual margin. The canopy decides how many trucks arrive. The building decides whether arriving mattered. Watch it unfold on an ordinary evening. A driver running low on legal hours pulls in around 6 and tops off tanks that hold well over 100 gallons. If the lot is already full, the truck idles back onto the ramp and the site earned its few dollars of fuel margin and nothing more. If a space is open or booked in advance through an app, the evening changes shape. A shower, free with the fill or sold outright, a hot dinner, maybe a service bay booking for a slow tire leak, then coffee at 5 in the morning. By sunup, that one painted rectangle made more gross profit than a string of fuel-only visits combined. Multiply it by 100 spaces and 365 nights, and the backlot quietly out earns the canopy. Nothing decides who stays the night like the asphalt out back, and the federal government has measured the shortage. Under a statute known as Jason's Law, federal highway survey teams counted around 313,000 truck parking spaces in the whole country, about 40,000 at public rest areas and 273,000 at private truck stops, an average of 143 spaces per stop. Weigh that against some 3.5 million drivers, and you get roughly one legal space for every 11 of them. 98% of nearly 12,000 surveyed drivers had trouble finding safe parking, and owners told the same survey their lots run past full capacity on ordinary weeknights. Scarcity like that carries a price. What every driver needs each night is not a perk. It is rent. Work by the American Transportation Research Institute found the average driver burns 56 minutes a day hunting for parking, losing about 9,300 paid miles a year, thousands of dollars in lost wages. When federal surveyors asked back in 2019, 3/4 of truck stops still gave parking away free. That era is closing. The big chains now sell reserved spaces by the night, turning painted lines into repeat revenue on land they already hold, and Congress approved $200 million in this year's federal budget to help build more spaces. Love's alone plans to pass 52,000 spaces by the end of 2026. For the owner, the math on a space is all but unfair. A stripe of paint on asphalt the site already owns, sold each night as a sure spot through the chain's own app, needs no stock, no cook, and no supplier, and the fee can beat the fuel margin a contracted truck leaves behind. The most valuable square feet on the property are not under the canopy. They are the white stripes behind the building, because the parked truck is the customer who spends. The ledger has one more side, and it never takes a night off. A full-size travel center runs 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That means staffing 3 shifts of cashiers, cooks, repair workers, and shower attendants who must be paid whether 10 trucks arrive or 10 dozen. It means lighting and securing a lot the size of several football fields, running walk-in coolers and fuel systems around the clock, and paying property taxes on some of the best-placed commercial land in the county. The physical plant burns money in ways outsiders rarely price in. Pavement built for cars fails fast under 80,000-pound trucks, and repaving acres of heavy-duty asphalt is a 6-figure event that arrives on its own schedule. Buried fuel tanks sit under strict federal environmental rules with leak sensors, insurance, and future replacement bills that can climb into the millions. High-speed diesel pumps, canopies, and point-of-sale systems all age whether or not freight is moving. Almost none of this bends down in a slow month. Fuel volume can fall by a third. The electric bill, the insurance premium, the payroll for around-the-clock operation, and the loan payment do not move at all. Real ownership here is not a landlord's easy life. It means fuel supply deals and pricing calls, a compliance file thick enough to fill a drawer, hiring for a building that never closes, and a cash line deep enough to swallow a 30% jump in wholesale diesel with no missed payroll. The owners who last run the place like an operating company and hold it like land, taking the margin today while the dirt gains value under it. Demand swings too. Trucking has begun emerging from what analysts called the longest freight downturn in decades. Spot rates collapsed after their 2022 peak. Thousands of small carriers left the business, and gallons and appetites shrank together at the exits. By early summer 2026, tighter capacity had pushed spot market measures well above year-earlier levels. Diesel, even after retreating from its spring peak, still cost about 84 cents more per gallon than 1 year earlier. Freight demand can recover while fuel remains expensive, squeezing carriers and changing where drivers spend. A travel center rides that entire cycle with a cost base that barely bends, selling fuel to an industry whose fortunes rise and fall beneath it. The cost of a seat at this table shows why big chains rule the exits. Love's says it puts about $20 million on average into each new site, which tends to bring around 50 jobs with it. Travel Center's own franchise papers price a brand new full-size build at as much as $26.5 million, while a swap of an old site into its small express format runs near $1.5 million. Land at a good exit, tanks in the ground, a canopy, a building, and acres of truck-rated pavement. This is heavy industry in a corner store's name tag. To watch these forces collide, Ownership Atlas built a simple model. Everything in it is hypothetical and labeled as such. A mid-sized travel center purchased for $8 million with $2 million down and a $6 million loan, amortized over 20 years at roughly 8.5%, requiring about $52,000 monthly. Assume it pumps 300,000 gallons of diesel and 80,000 gallons of gas monthly, staffs 30 people, and carries payroll, utilities, insurance, upkeep, property taxes, fees, and costs of roughly $180,000 a month, based on figures covered. None of this describes a real location. The point of the model is not precision. It is to show which lever moves the outcome and by how much when the same trucks keep rolling in. Give this place a strong month. Diesel nets 22 cents a gallon after fees, which is $66,000, and gas adds about $20,000 more. Inside, drivers convert $290,000 of store, food, and shower sales at a blended 55% margin, bring nearly $160,000, and reserved parking with other services adds roughly $20,000 on top. Total gross profit lands around $266,000. Subtract the $180,000 in running costs, set aside $12,000 for the asphalt and gear fund, pay the $52,000 loan, and the owner clears something like $22,000. A solid month, not a gold mine, a machine that works. Run the same building through a weak stretch, the kind the industry suffered in the freight recession. Same 300,000 gallons, because contracted fleet fuel keeps flowing even when nothing else does. The mix has soured, though. Diesel nets 8 cents, $24,000. Extra spending inside thins to $170,000 of sales, about $94,000 in margin, and paid services fall by half. Total gross profit is roughly $148,000. Running costs barely move, the reserve is still owed, and the loan does not care about freight cycles. This month, the owner writes checks for about $90,000 more than the business earned. The parking lot looked identical in both months. The bank account did not. Two levers created that swing of more than $110,000. 14 cents of diesel margin, worth $42,000 on this volume, and the inside conversion, worth about $76,000. The fuel lever sits mostly out of the owner's hands. It moves with wholesale markets, rivals signs, and fleet contracts. The inside lever is the one an operator truly controls through food, showers, clean floors, loyalty, and parking. In this model, and in the real filings, the variable with the greatest effect on owner returns is not how many gallons flow. It is how much gross profit each stopped truck leaves behind. It is also why revenue is such a risky number to lend against. A bank that sizes a loan to $11 or $12 million of yearly sales is really lending against $2 million of gross profit, and against far less than that in free cash once payroll, power, and pavement have been fed. History has already run this test at national scale. For most of the 2000s and 2010s, TravelCenters was the busy giant of the industry. Billions in annual sales, hundreds of sites, and painfully little to show for it. The reason sat in one line of its accounts. The company did not own most of its real estate. Its properties had been sold to a related real estate trust and leased back, and by 2022, TravelCenters was paying nearly $260 million a year in rent. In its best year ever, lifted by historic fuel margins, its whole income from operations was about $253 million. Even at the very peak, the landlord collected more than the operator earned. When BP bought the company in May of 2023 for $86 a share, an 84% premium, a business with $11 billion of revenue changed hands for about $1.3 billion. Compare that with operators who kept more control over their property and fuel networks. Pilot, built by the Haslam family of Tennessee, combined travel centers, wholesale fuel operations, and substantial real estate. Berkshire Hathaway acquired an initial 38.6% stake in 2017, paid $8.2 billion for another 41.4% in early 2023, then paid $2.6 billion for the remaining 20% in January 2024. Love's followed a different path without selling. Founded by Tom and Judy Love in 1964, with one filling station in Watonga, Oklahoma, the company remains family-owned, builds many of its locations, and plans to invest $700 million in 2026, including 1,500 additional truck parking spaces. These are not identical companies or transactions. Still, they show how ownership structure, property control, and high-margin services can produce dramatically different outcomes on the same highways for disciplined long-term owners. Put yourself behind the counter for a moment and leave your answer in the comments. You control one open acre at the back of the lot and enough cash to develop it once. Option 1, 2 more high-speed diesel lanes that raise your gallon count and your revenue. Option 2, 40 reserved parking spaces at $20 a night, plus the showers and dinners those parked drivers buy. The fast dollar or the sure one? Real owners face exactly this trade, and the answer usually shows whether they know which business they are truly in. Strip it all away and a crowded truck stop dies in one of 4 ways. The margin mix fails when contracted fleet gallons dominate and too few drivers walk inside. The fixed cost floor and the debt payment get sized to gross revenue instead of gross profit. So the owner borrowed against a river and gets paid from a stream. Working capital snaps when a fuel price spike like this spring soaks up cash faster than sales replace it. Or the purchase price itself was set during a fat year, the way fuel margins peaked in 2022, leaving the next owner to finance yesterday's profits out of tomorrow's normal ones. Notice that traffic appears nowhere on that list. Every one of those failures can happen, and regularly does, in a totally full parking lot. The same model shows when ownership really works. It works when the operator owns the land outright or carries light debt, keeping the fixed floor low. It works when the location captures overnight demand, because in a country short of legal parking, a site that can safely sleep 100 trucks holds quiet pricing power. It works too when the owner respects the cycle, banking cash and fat fuel margin years like 2022 instead of treating a windfall as the new normal, because this trade always sends the lean months back around. And it works when management treats fuel as an acquisition cost and obsesses over the inside of the building, the food, the showers, the service bays, the loyalty program, all that turns a 10-minute stop into a 10-hour customer. That resolves the riddle we opened with. The travel center clearing almost nothing on a $600 fill is not failing at its business. It is paying the entry price of its business. Diesel, at a few cents a gallon after fees, is not the product. It is the lure, a river of low-margin volume whose only job is to make loaded trucks break. The real enterprise begins after the parking brake sets: the shower, the hot meal, the repair bay, the reserved space, the 60% margins earned in minutes that fuel could never match. So the finances of a truck stop hang on three variables, and only three: the net cents left on each gallon once the card networks and fleet contracts take theirs, the gross profit each stopped truck leaves inside the building, and the weight of the fixed bills, the rent or the debt, sitting under both. Get those three right, and a truck stop becomes a durable cash-generating business along the American interstate. Get one wrong, and volume will not save you, because on the American road, the money was never riding in the tank. It walks through the front door, pays for a hot shower, and sleeps in a painted rectangle of asphalt that somebody was smart enough to own.